The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
The government wraps up hearings on trade violations regarding forced labor. Meanwhile, Teamsters ratify an agreement with the Los Angeles Unified School District. And today on the show, on Trades Day, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 125 in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 5th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Travis Erie will be our featured guest on the show today. Today is Trades Day. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we focus on a specific trade, and that trade today is the electrical workers, IBEW Local 125. Our featured guest is Travis Erie, who serves as business manager. The region is pretty wide. We're talking Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and parts of Northern California. That's the area, the jurisdiction for 125. This is a local that's been around since 1900 and recently celebrated 125 years. They have grown to roughly 4,500 members. The local represents workers across several sectors, including outside construction, utility work, government sector work, transmission authorities, generation facilities, independent power producers, line clearance, flagging, even traffic control. And we'll talk about the growth, especially since the pandemic, and get into the current work in the region. A major 500 kilovolt transmission line project is underway. That's on the east side of Oregon. We'll get into data centers. We'll talk about the apprenticeship program. Also about wind, solar, and offshore wind. There's been a kind of a snag in that because of some changes in the current administration, and we'll see how Travis is adapting to that. A lot of states are still picking up the slack, especially when it comes to alternative forms of energy. So Travis Erie, business manager of IBEW Local 125, will be our featured guest on the show today. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. The Office of the United States Trade Representative, USTR, has concluded hearings on potential Section 301 violations of the Trade Act of 1974 regarding forced labor. The agency announced a wide-reaching investigation, this was last month, into the governments of 60 countries related to their alleged failure to impose and effectively enforce a ban on the importation of goods produced with forced labor. Trump appointee Jamieson Greer claims that forced labor in the named countries requires American companies to compete with artificially low prices. Well, the investigation appears to be a response by the administration to the Supreme Court's decision a couple of months ago in Learning Resources, which actually struck down Trump's attempt to impose tariffs under the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. Now, under Section 301, if USTR concludes unreasonable or discriminatory burdens or restrictions exist, the agency is actually permitted to impose tariffs. Now, courts have the power to review these decisions, and some commentators are suspicious of the USTR's ability under Section 301 to implement the kind of sweeping, fast-paced tariff seen last year. Nonetheless, they're still going to look into it. The hearing is one of the final opportunities for public comment before the agency actually makes a determination. So we'll see what happens there. By the way, a test confirmed by the New York Times revealed that clothes for some so-called Labubu dolls contain cotton banned under a forced labor law in the United States. Now, if you go back 5 years, 2021, Congress passed the so-called Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which prohibits the import of products made in a certain part of China due to findings that the Communist Party there subjects the people to genocide, state-imposed forced labor, and crimes against humanity. Violators of the act may be placed on a blacklist that bans selling all of their products in the country. By the way, the craze over the Labubu dolls began around April of 2024 and generated over $400 million in revenue. Local 2010 of the Teamsters have voted to ratify an agreement with the Los Angeles Unified School District. As reported last week, the unions and district reached a 2-year agreement following threats of a strike, which was coordinated with Service Employees International Union Local 99, which represents bus drivers, custodians, and cafeteria workers in the district. 92% of voting members approved the contract, which includes an increase in salary of 11.65% and establishes the starting teacher salary at $77,000 a year. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, IBEW Local 125 in the Pacific Northwest.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast. AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to the Pacific Northwest. And joining us from IBEW Local 125 is their business manager. That would be Travis Erie. And we're going to talk about, well, there's a lot of things going on when it comes to wind and solar, and we want to make sure those jobs are union jobs, okay? It's important that they are union jobs. There's an effort going on nationally by the IBEW to make that happen, and Travis is one of those people. Travis, welcome to America's Workforce. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get into the subject matter here, talk to me a little bit about Local 125, how many members, your jurisdiction. Go ahead, brother. It's all yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good morning. So Local 125's been around since 1900. We just celebrated 125 years last year, and we are 45 members across Oregon, Washington, Idaho and Montana, and we represent people in the construction, outside construction, utility, government sector with transmission authorities, generation facilities, whether they're independent power producers or utility. We have the line clearance members that clear the lines of flagging, traffic control, those types of things. So we're a pretty diverse local, mostly covering the outside construction and utility sectors. So
Okay, that 4,500 number, has that been going up recently?
I
Steady?
think we come out of the pandemic around 3,600, so we've grown almost 1,000 members since 2022.
Nice organizing there.
Oh.
Now you got
A lot of work too. So I can't claim all the victories, but there's just been a huge influx of work in the construction side.
Oh, we're seeing so much going on with the skilled trades right now. And I know a lot of that is, in the previous administration, we had the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Jobs Act that added a lot. You got various states that have improved their infrastructure. You put a combination of that together, obviously you're going to see a lot of growth. I want to talk about your apprenticeship program too, and we'll get into climate jobs and that kind of thing as well. But as far as you, I mean, you're a business manager. I don't know how long you've been business manager, but you decided, I'm sure many years ago, that this might be your path in life. What led you down that road, Travis?
It wasn't a direct path. My dad was a lineman for the utility here, the private investor-owned utility. He retired, but he always said, go to college. You don't want to do what I did. And so that's what I tried. I tried doing that. Got an aviation degree, actually. Decided it wasn't for me. Didn't like the long-distance flights. Felt like it was not going to be exciting for me. So I regrouped, quit college, started working in the trade as a groundman on a line crew. And started with line clearance, actually, drag and brush, and started at the bottom. Got my apprenticeship in 93 and topped out as a journeyman in 98, early 98. And it was right after that, the business manager at that time, we had some openings here at our local and asked me that fall to come in as the business rep. So I only spent a few months as 6 months as a journeyman lineman. Quickly got my taste as to what representing members could be, and really didn't know shit when I came in here. And we had a lot of people at that time, some very old members that said it wasn't my place. And I just put my head down, told them I'd do the work. If I didn't know it, I'd get them the answer. And 7 years, I was a business rep before, in 2005, becoming the business manager. So the business manager at that time retired. And in 2005, I ran and was selected by our membership, and I've been the business manager ever since. So
Wow.
coming up on 21 years.
Wow, congratulations. Well, you had to earn it. Obviously it took some time. It's funny, we talk on this show so much about people who found their path in life. And I just did a podcast not long ago with someone in the painters. And this was out of Rockford, Illinois. She was doing dead-end jobs, service jobs for a long time. She had a kid and she just couldn't make ends meet. And she got involved with a Goodwill pre-apprenticeship program, Goodwill. And it changed her life. I mean, now she's knocking on 40. It took her almost 20 years. She didn't even graduate from high school. And she used that Goodwill partnership to get her GED, and she found her way into the painters and allied trades, and she loves it. And now she's just looking to a bright future. So everybody's a little bit different, but the bottom line is this: you found your sweet spot in life. I mean, look at what's happening here over at Local 125. It's certainly good news. So what does it look like? I mean, obviously it's busy now, but what do you see ahead?
Our work is pretty diverse right now. We've got a huge transmission line, 500 kV transmission line on the east side of the state that's going. It's 300 miles, and so it's in the initial stages. We've got footers, foundations going in, and steel erection. We do have a lot of data center work on the eastern side of the state. We've got a lot of wildfire hardening. So, of course, if you've been watching the news in Oregon, we keep having these terrible wildfire years. We've got litigation going on with our investor-owned utilities, and so that creates a ton of work to make sure that they don't have any susceptibility of starting additional fires. So wildfire hardening, a lot of tree wire going in. And then, of course, the line clearance side of that is the same thing in order to try to prevent any potential for wildfire, our utilities are pretty active in making sure that they get their clearances and a lot of wildfire settings. So we're doing a lot of work during the summer, trying to make sure that we don't start any kind of ignition sources.
With that being said, what's your apprenticeship program looking like? And I bring that up when we talk on a regular basis with the Central Ohio building trades. There's a lot going on in Central Ohio. It's like the new Silicon Valley with data centers, Google, Facebook, high-tech stuff that's keeping the trades really busy. One of the issues with data centers, there's some pushback from communities. I'm just wondering if it's happening out there as well. I think a lot of people don't understand what these data centers are all about, especially in the rural parts. What are you hearing over there?
There's a big concern on the environmental side of the data centers, whether it's the water resources, whether there's we've actually had some lawsuits against some data centers over east for water pollution, where runoff of the data centers is causing higher levels of nitrate. Now, it's also a lot about agriculture too, but the data centers are getting pulled into it. Data centers are getting hit from a legislative side in our state, where they're trying to regulate what that cost to the consumer is, making sure that if you're going to build a data center, we want to make sure that that's not going to impact the customers as well. They're not going to have their rates drawn up because of a data center being sited within their region, and they're going to have to pay for the build out of the footprint of that grid to serve it. So trying to make sure that our utilities are building a rate structure that keeps the data center responsible for their build out. But you're right. We're hearing the same things environmentally, where people are pushing back, whether it's because of water resources or whether they just think that the load that's coming into their region is unnecessary and it's going to cost them in the long run. So a lot of fears around it, and a lot of fears around AI in general.
Yeah. The future, you don't know what it's going to bring. There's a lot of challenges that are ahead, and you just got to be as best prepared as possible. With that being said, obviously your apprenticeship program, I assume, has to be at full speed right now. Can you speak to that?
I wish it was. In fact, we actually have 80 apprentices laid off out of around 450 apprentices in our program now. Our apprenticeship covers Oregon, Washington, northern Idaho, and northern California, about 3 counties in California. But we've had probably 10 to 15 years of full employment where we rarely have apprentices laid off, rarely have journeymen laid off. But this last year and the year before, both of the winter months, starting December, January, February, we've been seeing some layoffs. Last year was around 60 apprentices laid off. This year, it's up to about 82 apprentices right now that are on the out of work list. So we have people to do the work. Like everyone was saying, we're not going to have enough people to do this work, right? That's what we kept hearing. They're ready. It's just trying to get the work going. We've had this current administration that's put a stop to a lot of work across the country, including Oregon. There could have been probably some additional jobs out there. But the data centers are propping up a lot of work with the substations and transmission lines to connect them, distribution upgrades. We had a lot of electric vehicle work in our state where we were trying to upgrade the grid in order to serve electric vehicle charging stations. That's kind of went away. It's kind of stalled out. The utilities had a ton of dock work where they weren't able to cover the work themselves. And so new connects, whether it was new connects or distribution upgrades, like I said, the wildfire hardening created a lot of jobs for us, but those have been scaling back. We've seen our utilities cutting dock crews and trying to make sure that they're doing more with their internal crews. So I think there is a little bit less work going on right now. I can't point my finger at any one thing that is the really smoking gun cause of it.
Our featured guest today is business manager Travis Erie from IBEW Local 125. The website is IBEW125.com. More to come from Travis right after this. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org. The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. You know, today is Trades Day here on America's Workforce. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we focus on a specific trade. Today, it's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and one local specifically, that would be 125 in the Pacific Northwest. Travis Erie is their business manager. They have 4,500 members right now. IBEW125.com is a website. I want to talk about wind and solar, and I saw this from your international president, Ken Cooper, who is an Ohio guy, worked in Mansfield, Ohio. I had to throw a plug there. We originate this show out of Cleveland, Ohio. And with the current administration, the Trump administration decided to pause leases for offshore wind projects that employed a lot of members from the IBEW. And I know a lot of this was on the Atlantic coast. Well, you're in the Pacific Northwest. I would imagine that would have touched your members as well, right?
Yeah, we had actually some of our delegation went over to the Atlantic coast and toured some of the wind facilities. I wasn't lucky enough to get a chance to do that, but yeah, Oregon did have some areas that were permitted and approved, along with California. There was the Oregon southern coast and halfway up. So we had large areas that were being looked at for wind energy. We had several locals in our 4 local agreement that would have work that would have been putting people to work. Our utilities would have served those as well. So our members are directly affected by cancellation of that offshore wind, especially not only in Oregon, but down in California too. So the entire West Coast was impacted by that.
Well, that would be under the federal government since it's offshore. Now, what's happening in various states? And I bring this up. I mean, we've got solar and wind projects. A lot of states they're far ahead of this. Other countries are farther ahead of this. And the important thing is you got to make sure that these are good union jobs. And a lot of them over the course of the last several years were not. So what can you speak to in your area over there, Travis?
Well, we've been building a lot of wind and solar, but I think that we've got a new organization that we just propped up, Climate Jobs Oregon. And Climate Jobs Oregon came about from Cornell. It was driven by Cornell, who's been studying opportunities within the climate sector. As they see new climate jobs coming about, whether that's wind or solar or battery storage or pump storage, they found that there's a huge opportunity for trades to be prevalent in the build out of all of this infrastructure, whether it's directly related to build out of the grid or generation facilities. There's also a lot of climate jobs created through infrastructure improvements within commercial buildings, industrial buildings. So it's not just grid focused. So Cornell did a widespread study. They've been doing these things nationally. They took it on in Oregon, and we created a nonprofit that's made up of the building trades. Myself, I sit on that board, and our job is to make sure that as we look at opportunities for the climate job build out, there's several things that we need to take into play. One, making sure that if it's going to be built and it's going to be a new climate job resource, whether it's generation or transmission upgrade, we want that work to be union, and we want to make sure that we have a voice in how it's staffed. So, myself, along with the building trades locals that sit on this, we just hired our director. He started 2 days ago. So we're still in the infancy of this thing, but I see a lot of good work. And I think having us in this footprint not only gives us a voice of what's being built, but also gives us the ability to make sure that we're not doing away with any resources that we need as well. It's like, I've heard this across many different people that speak in the industry about load growth. Like, building transmission to replace existing is not going to cut it. This is an all above approach. We've got to keep the resources that we have in place. We've got to keep them working. We've got to upgrade them, whether it's natural gas. We've got a lot of hydro in the Northwest. So we can't be doing away with these resources while we build out new, because we're not going to gain any load capacity. So it's got to be above and beyond. It's got to be adding to, and then it's also got to be upgrading those facilities too.
It's funny you brought that up. I remember a conversation I had years ago with Terry O'Sullivan. Terry's the former general president of our presenting sponsor here on the show, LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. And he said to me, Flash, we want it all. And that's when they were getting into the Keystone Pipeline. He said, we have a thirst for energy in this country. We need it all. We need gas. We need coal. We need those pipelines built. We need solar. We need wind. We need it all. And I get that. I get that. So let me ask you this. I might be premature. You just launched this Climate Jobs Oregon. What's the reception? I mean, there had to be some buzz, especially in the media, in various communities. What are people saying?
We focused a lot on trying to make sure that all of the legislators in the state knew what we were and knew what we were trying to accomplish. Oregon is very worker friendly. So we've got a lot of, whether it's House representatives or Senate representatives, that they want to see us be able to do good and put jobs out there in their communities that speak to kids coming out of high school that want an option rather than college, of how I can get a good job and how I can raise a family and how I can stay in my community. These jobs are ways that you can do that. They truly are a way that you get a ticket to the middle class. And so having an opportunity where we get to have insight on what's being built, making sure that it's a union job that's going to provide somebody a way to raise a family is a pretty cool thing to be involved with.
You mentioned Cornell, great university, super university, and they do such great research. Did they have a number of potential jobs that could be created if everything was, perfectly laid out here? You got all the parties together. What are we looking at? What kind of projection? They had to have some kind of number in mind, did they?
Well, nationally, they're saying 100,000 electrical workers are needed within our industry. Of course, our international president, Kenny Cooper, he keeps saying, we're going to get this IBEW up to 1 million members. We're closing in on 900,000 right now. So I think we're going to do it. There's a lot of work ahead of us. And so it's just trying to make sure that we get these jobs moving. Like I mentioned that I've been a business manager since 2005. And in 2006, we started work on a transmission line, which was the one I was talking about that goes on the eastern side of the state. So it took 20 years to get that 500 kV transmission line permitted. We can't have that. We've got to move things quicker than that. We've got to be able to build a transmission line in under 10 years, or we're going to fall behind. We cannot keep up at this pace and take care of what is needed in our electrical infrastructure industry.
Have you had that conversation with your elected representatives over there?
Over and over and over. Yeah. They keep asking, why can't we serve these data centers? Why can't we get enough capacity on our grid? It all comes down to permitting. And that's a national problem, not just an Oregon problem.
Oh, God, yeah. Just to get a new house together, and the cost of those permits are ridiculous. No, I get it. I totally get it. Travis, thank you so much for your time. And I'll tell you, let's keep in touch. Especially, I wouldn't mind linking up with, give him a little breathing room here, but you just said you hired somebody for Climate Jobs Oregon. Maybe you could set up a conversation with him, and maybe you could be part of that as well. What do you think?
That'd be great. I know that we're trying to get the word out. I think the more that people are knowing what it is that we're trying to do within the Climate Jobs Oregon, I think the more work we're going to get, the more union jobs we're going to build. And so I think it's a good start.
Well, it's only appropriate that you be on the #1 union podcast in America. So I'll hold you to it, brother. Okay.
Sounds great.
Travis Erie, business manager of 125, IBEW Local 125, IBEW125.com is a website you want to go to. And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, the Ohio AFL-CIO and the United Labor Agency. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.